While the West tightens its financial grip on the world, one tiny desert nation has built a door that cannot be shut. A fortress that has turned the world's most restrictive laws into a trillion-dollar blueprint for survival. In our previous deep dive, we revealed the mechanics of the Shadow Fleet, the invisible armada currently bypassing global trade laws to move millions of barrels of sanctioned oil. But to understand how this illicit fleet actually survives, we have to look past the ships and into the heart of the infrastructure that validates them, the Arab Switzerland. Today, we are decoding the mechanical blueprint of the UAE and how it became the only place on Earth where the world's dark money is perfectly legal. For over a century, the world had only one neutral vault, Switzerland. But as the West began weaponizing the global financial system, the old rules of neutrality collapsed. Over the last decade, a far more sophisticated fortress has been quietly perfected in the Persian Gulf. This isn't a new development. It is the culmination of a 20-year blueprint to make the UAE the world's first unsanctionable economy. While the US Treasury watches helplessly, gold, oil, and billions in dark money flow through a single point on the map. It is the only place where a Russian oligarch, an Iranian oil trader, and a Silicon Valley investor can sit in the same room. For decades, the global financial system had a clear set of rules, largely written in Washington, D.C. If you were sanctioned, you were effectively deleted from the world economy. You couldn't move dollars, you couldn't use SWIFT, and your assets were frozen. But the UAE realized that neutrality is the most valuable commodity in the 21st century. By refusing to take sides in the escalating conflicts between East and West, Dubai and Abu Dhabi have positioned themselves as the ultimate middlemen. The first pillar of this hub is the infrastructure for the Shadow Fleet. On paper, sanctioned oil shouldn't reach the market. But tankers often go dark near the UAE coast, turning off their transponders before pulling into the massive bunkering port of Fujairah. Here, oil is mixed, rebranded, and sold as Emirati blends. By the time it leaves the port, the paper trail is clean. The UAE has turned geography into a legal shield. The real secret isn't just in the water, it's in the gold. Since 2022, the UAE has become the world's primary destination for Russian gold. While London and New York shut their doors, Dubai's refineries saw record-breaking volume. The logic is simple. Unlike digital currency, gold is physically anonymous. It can be melted down, recast, and sold as a new product in hours. By providing a physical hub for precious metals, the UAE has created a parallel financial system that doesn't rely on Western banks. Then there is the legal infrastructure. The UAE has created over 40 free zones, like the Dubai Multi-Commodities Center. Inside these zones, a foreign company can be set up in days with 100% foreign ownership. Thousands of firms have relocated here from Moscow, Tehran, and Europe, not just to escape taxes, but to escape visibility. The UAE has made itself too connected to fail. However, the current 2026 conflict has exposed a terrifying crack in the armor. Despite hosting massive US installations like Al Dhafra, the UAE has found that the American military umbrella is no longer impenetrable. During the recent escalations of Operation Epic Fury, Iranian drones and missiles successfully reached UAE soil, striking critical energy sites. The US failure to provide a total shield has sparked a strategic rethink. Abu Dhabi is realizing that a massive US military presence doesn't just provide protection, it provides a target. This vulnerability has forced the UAE to accelerate its shift toward the east. In this emerging world order, the UAE's safety doesn't come from an American missile battery. It comes from being so economically vital to the east that no one would dare to strike it again. We are witnessing the redrawing of the global map, and at Capitoria, we are tracking every move. If you want to see how these hidden corridors are being built and what they mean for the future of global power, make sure to like this video and subscribe.